Hi, this has been a really hard video to make, almost as hard as finally accepting that I was abused by my previous partner. I have had to untangle 3 years of a relationship in which I lost myself, I lost my identity, my self-confidence, and my sense of normality. It's now a year and a half, and I am finally ready to talk about it in an as objective way as possible. I am finally ready to share my story of psychological, emotional, and sexual violence used against me for 3 years. To be fully honest, I did not want to make this video. It's much easier to just stay quiet, move on with your life, and yeah, let us slide into memories. But, and for me it's a really big but, shutting up like a good girl is not going to change anything. I refuse to be silent. I want to help other people to understand how the abusive behavior works, how it looks like, and how to deal with it. When you think of the domestic violence, you probably imagine black bruised eyes and loud screams, but it rarely starts like that. Instead, it frequently starts with an intense love and then insidiously slides towards the obsessive control. He asked me on a first date almost straight away after we met, and things moved so fast. The romance, the kisses, the compliments. It was the second week when he said that he might offer me to marry him, and to be honest, I was so, in love, that I was ready to say yes. The first red flag, which would signal a toxic relationship, for me appeared during the first month. I knew that before me he was seeing a fairly new friend of mine, but he assured me that there is and was absolutely nothing between the two of them. Nothing romantic and for sure nothing intimate. However, once I saw her reaction seeing us, I became a little bit suspicious. She was avoiding us and she seemed to be awkwardly unhappy. So I discussed her behavior with my partner, and he said that it's just her imagining things, that probably she's just jealous because he chose me and not her. You know, it all sounded a little bit like soap opera, but I believed him, and I actually started to see her like a little bit crazy girl. One evening we attended the same party, and even though she was trying to avoid us, I noticed in her eyes not the craziness or jealousy that I was told about, but some kind of like sadness and pain. I left to the toilet, found her and asked her to leave the party and go with me to the bar. We left the party, went to the bar, and after some hesitation she actually opened up. She started to cry and told me what actually happened between two of them before me. There was romance, there were kisses and other things that couples do. For me, it sounded much more than nothing, and I finally could understand why she thought things can be serious between them. Also, when I knew the full story, I could also understand why she was confused when suddenly he changed and started to act like nothing ever happened between them. So the conclusion for me was clear. She wasn't crazy at all, and he was a liar. I couldn't believe I was fooled, and as a result, I treated my friend so unfairly. I was angry, furious, but I was still in love. I didn't want the fairy tale to be over. He cried, he swore that he lied in order to protect me and that I'm the most important person for him in the world. And also, for the first time, he said that he loved me. And for me, that was enough to forgive him and stay. Now I know that it was naive and silly, though back then, when everything else felt so great and intense, it seemed like my forgiveness would bring this relationship back to being perfect. Probably everyone have heard about the cruel test with a frog in hot boiling water. Put a frog in a hot water, she'll jump out of it, but put her in a cold water, heat it slowly, and she will slowly get boiled. It is exactly how the abusive relationship works too. First, I was advised what to eat, what to wear, what hobbies are the best for me. And I didn't realize how and when I became fully under his control. And due to this, when the serious cases appeared, I didn't recognize or respond to them as I should have, which now looks nothing less than stupid or as a minimum naive, though this is exactly how the abusive relationship works. The financial control had a very innocent beginning. When we first met, I had just opened my business, the first physical and online vegan food store in the Baltic countries, still very proud of. It was very challenging, and as I didn't have a rich family behind me, all the money I got went back to the shop. I was working in my shop as a director, as well as a manager, courier, cashier, cleaner, and everything else you can imagine during the day, and I was also sleeping there during the night. After a few weeks of dating, my partner offered to move in with him. I tried to explain to him that I don't have any money for the rent and I cannot afford the organic, expensive food you eat. At that moment, I actually was eating only the outdated products from my own shop, which was perfectly fine. He assured me that I should not worry about the money at all, as the rent won't cost him any extra. And I eat so little that he won't even notice the difference. So I should just feel relaxed and take that as a gift. At that moment, I didn't know that he would ask me to pay a huge price for this gift later. So I moved in. Later, he got interested in my business. As I was thinking of opening a new shop in the very center of the city, he insisted I borrow money from him because he has extra cash he didn't use. For me, it sounded great, as it meant I don't need to go to the banks and it will save a lot of time and hassle. I promised to give him all the money back, whatever happens. He helped with things like designing and building the shelves, collecting and installing the refrigerators, and improving my IT system. So he built my trust in him as a potential business partner, and I offered him 15% of the company shares. I know it was generous considering the total amount of time he spent was tiny compared to 12 hours a day. I worked nearly every day. In the end, I agreed to borrow the money from him and subsequently made a lot of commitments for the suppliers and leaseholders. However, when the day to pay for all these commitments came, he turned around and told me that he doesn't trust me and that if I want to use the money, I must give him half of my company as well as pay the money back. If you understand anything about the business, you know that to lend someone money while asking 50% of the company as well as the money back is an outrageous demand. I was shocked. I was confused, but I also had no other choice. In that moment, I needed to pay bills or go out of the business, which obviously wasn't what I wanted. So I agreed, but I also hoped that when the debt was cleared, he would give the company back to me. I also kind of hope that this is one of his weird ways to motivate me. And also, I didn't want to believe that he could be so cruel to me, as from the very beginning of our relationship, he knew that that company was everything to me. So after keeping my optimism and after having paid half of the debt, I asked him about returning my company back. Honestly, I couldn't believe what I had. I was told that without him, I would be nothing and my company would be nothing too, that even if I worked 4 years and he a couple of hours, his time is worth much, much more than mine. And so he will never return me the company and I can just forget it. The company that I pressured and loved so much became my burden. And in time, one of his biggest levers to stop me from leaving him. So to manage all the risks and my freedom, I decided to sell it. As promised, I fully returned the borrowed money and one last time asked to give my company back to me. But what I heard then was that there's actually nothing to return. That he calculated all the money he spent on me during the last 3 years. You know, the rent, the food, the travels, everything that was said to be help or gifts now suddenly had a price tag. If I had known that I would need to pay for all his gifts with half of my company, I would have never accepted them. After all, I was I was happy living in my shop, eating whatever food I have, and I was never dreaming of traveling to Asia only for climbing. It was his dreams, but now I needed to pay for that. In addition to this, I was told that I'm being very ungrateful, that I'm all about the money, and that he already told some of his friends what an unthankful bitch I am, and that they were very, very disappointed. To make it clear, this was probably one of the most awful things he did to me. He acted like he wanted to help me, like he wanted to be generous, lending me money and saving me from going to the banks. But then, when it was too late, when I absolutely needed the money, he screwed me over, and I had no choice but to agree with what he asked for. I am a trusting person, and I have expectations of how people are in relationship. And I did not imagine that really he would keep half of the company once I pay him the money back. Abuse has many more faces, and I want to know that all of the following situations were never, emphasizing never, a singular event. The frequency might vary from a couple a year to dozens a day. Isolation does not necessarily mean that you are locked at home, though such cases also exist. It can be much more subtle. One out of several people he tried to isolate me from was my mom, who generally has a quite pro-feminist ideology. I remember her being very stressed when she took care of my grandmother, who was suffering from dementia for 10 years. I tried to see them as often as possible in order to help or, just to be together. Though my partner said that I should stop visiting my mother. According to him, she was giving me stress, and then I was bringing that stress back to him. He told me that she was a bad influence and no good for me. So the story starts like that. Once I left my laptop at the shop, and when I was home, my partner kindly offered me to use his laptop. When at some point I changed my passwords, I was asked, what am I hiding? And if I'm not hiding anything, what was the point to change the passwords? In a way that sounded kind of logical, especially as I really didn't have anything to hide. Sometime later, we had a serious argument, and all angry, he left for work. And I felt hopeless, and I wanted to talk to someone. So I wanted to talk to someone who would really understand me. So I texted his ex via Facebook. In 3 seconds, another chat dialogue popped up, which looked something like, what the actual fuck? And I was like, shit. I accidentally sent the message to him, not to her. But then I rechecked, what did I do? And actually, no. I sent the message to his ex, not to him. But he was stalking my social accounts from his work. Then I realized I have no privacy. My partner was an IT geek, and he was proud knowing how to hack other people's passwords, so there was no point for me to change the passwords. There was literally no point. As I got better at climbing, my partner started to dislike the fact that I enjoy climbing with other people, but at the same time without him. He told me that I was betraying him after I joined the other girl to do the climbing training session, or when I was on the girls-only climbing chat, or when we were trying to plan the weekend climbing trip with the girls, or even having a girls' sleepover. He said that he would never do this to me, and I'm just abandoning him. I kept receiving huge guilt trips after every attempt to do something without him. I couldn't bear more drama in the relationship, which was already incredibly intense. And I also knew from my own experience that trying to argue back would result in an arguing all night. I didn't know what to say to my friends, as this whole situation seemed to be ridiculous. And also I felt shame, because by doing what he wanted made it look like I was totally under his thumb. So in the end, I just started to avoid possible fun and withdrew myself from almost all social activities that didn't include him. I felt how I'm losing myself, and little things really added up. There were so many rules that managed aspects of my life. Like once I came home and I found my salt, because he didn't eat salt, in the trash bin. He said it's poisonous and I shouldn't eat that. or I was not allowed to drink coffee, and this might actually be worth detailing. It was the last day before the grand opening of my shop, and obviously there were a lot of things still to be done. So my partner offered his help after he finishes off his work. In the run-up, I was working a lot, like from 9 a.m. to 2 a.m. It was exhausting. And the day before the launch, two friends of mine came to say hello and offered me to have a coffee break with them. While we were having a coffee, my partner entered the shop, and his first words were something like, "Hi, what the hell is that?" I didn't understand what he's on about. Then he continued saying that he thought that I don't drink coffee, as he told me that it's bad. My friends and I started laughing, hoping it's just a joke, but it wasn't a joke. He was really angry, so my friends started to calm him down, but he got more and more furious. So we went a little bit to the side, and he told me that I'm being stupid, that there's no valid reason why I should ever drink coffee, and that he is very, very disappointed. It sounded like I have just betrayed him. I couldn't believe that we were having a drama because I just had a cup of coffee. I tried to explain what a pointless argument that is, especially when we have a lot of much more important things to do, like, you know, tomorrow is the shop's opening, so we could just work on the shelves. But that made him fully mad, and he just slammed the door and left the shop. One of the most important days of my life, my partner, who promised to help me and who, let me remind you, at that moment officially had 50% of my company shares, simply put his ego first and tried to send me yet on another guilt trip. As I came back home very late, had a few hours of sleep and left very early, we didn't really see each other. He was asleep all the time. And on the day of the opening, in the evening, he came to the shop only to hear apology from me. I know it will sound stupid, and I'm already laughing, but at that moment I had so many things to stress about that having another drama was not something that I could possibly handle. So I apologized because I had a cup of coffee yesterday and moved on with my life. Similar things would happen when I wanted to use a red lipstick or wear high heels during my friends' weddings, or when I wanted to go back to my passion, dancing, or even when I wanted to rescue a dog. I was told no, because it's not in his vision of life. It felt like he wanted to sculpt me by cutting some of my original pieces and adding some of his choosing. I desperately wanted to remember who I am. I wanted to smell the freedom, and so multiple times I asked for some time alone, but I simply wasn't allowed. I was strictly told that he doesn't believe in some time alone and that it wouldn't help us as a couple. So I offered to get help from the couple therapists, and he literally hated this idea. He told me he reads enough psychological articles to know everything about himself, and that he doesn't have time to listen for some stupid therapist's questions about his childhood. Finally, to show what a stupid idea that is, he sarcastically encouraged me to go there alone, as I am the one who actually needs help. And that's the essence, that's the thing. I was always the one who needed to get help. During 3 years, I never had an apology apart from the moment when I left him and he was desperate to get me back. He simply never thought he was wrong. Never. Period. In the meanwhile, my philosophy was that both of us must be at least partly responsible. So to practice what I preach, I started to apologize, and suddenly I became the only one who apologizes. Always. And then the sad part came. As I was always the one who was apologizing, I started to believe that, maybe it is actually me who is the problem. Maybe I should simply fix myself and there's nothing to do with my partner. I started to make more and more compromises and self-adjustments, and being constantly criticized made me doubt that I'm actually good enough for anything. In the meanwhile, my partner was building his tower of control, and so the put-downs came, one after the other. For example, inspired by one yogi, I started to work out on a new yoga pose, which was really hard, you know, the one where you take your leg and lift it high above your head. So I wanted to know how far or how close I am from the final result. And I took the camera and asked my partner to record it. But what he said, that I will just never achieve it and I should not waste my time on that. The other time I was told to choose another climbing project, as obviously I can't climb that hard, which sounded weird because I was not so far away from actually doing it. Even when I started to sell the company, I was told that my company is worth nothing and that he'll be surprised if anyone pays any money for it. Maybe my self-esteem was constantly being damaged, but I still had some self-respect. And when I complained that putting me down is actually not nice, he explained me that he is the only person who was telling me the actual truth, and I should be very grateful for that. Then he started to ridicule me, sort of make fun of me more and more often. Sometimes it was delicate jokes about my habits, but sometimes it was harsh black type of jokes about my intellect or my character. I was asking him, why are you treating me without any respect? But what he told me that obviously it's just my bad sense of humor and that I was the only one who didn't get the joke. But then some closer friends of mine started to come and ask me, why do I let myself to be treated so disrespectfully? So I sort of unplugged my ear and started to hear the rumors describing my partner as a despot, as a tyrant, or simply people not understanding why do I not leave him. So after all, there was no problem with my sense of humor. Just for understanding, as an example, there's a quote of a friend of mine who remembered two situations where I was ridiculed. One, where he tells me that I'm not as smart as I should be with my fancy math degree, and the other where he's encouraging me to fail and fall on the hard bit of my probably hardest climbing project so far. So I wasn't alone thinking something was wrong. Now I understand that the repeated attempts to make fun of my intellect or capabilities was probably the way to make him feel sure that he's the superior one in the couple. Things added up, and only the last straw was needed to break the camel's back, or in this case, my sanity. I remember we were having an argument about my company. It was intense and emotional, so the memories are a little bit blurry. The fact is that we were shouting on each other, him basically denying all of my achievements, that I wasn't that important for my company, that his input was much more significant even if it was few hours, and that without him, I would be nothing and my company would be nothing too. He was ripping off all of my achievements into shreds and presumed that he was very important for the company. But reality is, if you add up all the time he spent on company, it might be a couple of months compared to 4 years that I spent on it, building it from nothing. Literally, I started with 500 euros in my hands and 2 study mates who helped me with the IT part. I was there for my growing company day and night, early mornings and late evenings, anytime my business needed me. Obviously, my partner knew that, and he was purposely insulting me, and I asked him to shut up, but he didn't stop. It was so painful that in order to stop him from offending me, I tried to slap him. But he caught my hand and with disgust face said something like, "Look at yourself, look how disgusting you are." And as I said, for him, it was a way to show me that I can't control my emotions, that I am the crazy one. But really, that is yet another way for abuser to build his control. They know exactly which buttons to push in order to get you out of balance and make you doubt your own sanity. The psychological term for this behavior is gaslighting. And then there was sexual abuse. To be honest, I do not really want to talk about this in detail for obvious reasons, but it's safe to say that consent was not something he respected. And also, based on his actions, I was often very afraid that he actually wished to accidentally get me pregnant in order to keep me with him. This is the baddest part. Now, you have to remember that these are just singular examples and that the pattern of all sorts of abuse was constant or growing, with the pauses only when he tried to stop me from leaving or during the honeymoon phase, the period of time that follows after a breakup attempt, where the abuser becomes very nice to the victim. So in the course of any month, there could be hundreds of put-downs, criticisms, micro-controls, put-downs, and aggressive responses if something was questioned or fought back. There would have been countless times when I would just reach the point to apologize without really knowing why, or complied when I did not feel that I wanted to, simply to avoid getting into a huge relationship drama, which would consume days and nights, a lot of energy, and leave me too exhausted to do my job properly. Living a life like this is exhausting, and the last thing you wanted to do is to make it worse. So you end up walking on the eggshells, tiptoeing around your partner to simply make your life manageable. Before answering the very popular question, so why the hell he didn't leave, I want to briefly talk about my partner's ex-girlfriend who was with him almost the same amount of time, 2.5 years. She asked to stay anonymous, and of course I respect that, but she also let me to use screenshots of our chat. What I heard from her sounded almost like déjà vu. The same type of abuse, the same type of strategies to not let her go. When I let her read my recollection, she was shocked that he didn't really change at all. Ridicule, sexism, stalking, controlling behaviors, lost identity and damage to self-worth. And never, not even once, during 2.5 years, he apologized to her. Even the sexual abuse aspects were almost the same. So it's not specifically me or specifically her. It's not about someone's personality. It's the whole situation where leaving, it's much harder than you can imagine. So I didn't leave. First of all, like most of the people in this type of relationship, I didn't realize I was abused. I honestly thought that I'm not that type of woman who could be abused in the first place. Well-educated, self-confident, pro-feminist, I was a businesswoman, not a victim. I was so far away from identifying myself as a victim of domestic abuse that I realized it only when a new friend of mine, who apparently was a criminologist working with women experiencing domestic violence, sent me a link to do a few domestic abuse tests. I remember being very defensive. No, it wasn't abuse, it was just a tough relationship, you know. Everyone has those. And she was like, just do the test, darling. Shockingly, my score was 73.3%, and the program advised me to immediately seek professional help. I did another test. The other test said that out of 17 points, 13 points identifying me as a victim of domestic abuse. I did one more test, 83%. I was shocked that I was so blind. So why victims are blind? I started to read articles to understand this. It was a really tough question. How come that having an over 70% score in being a victim of abuse, I never even thought of that? How? As I already mentioned in my story, the abuse starts slowly and then builds up. At first, you see it as help, where another person is trying to make you a better you. With every adjustment, the power leaks to your partner. With every adjustment, the controlling behavior gets normalized, and actions that would have made me storm out of the first date, later were seen as normal. So you might feel as a victim in your relationship, but it does not mean that you will accept the fact that you are a victim in an abusive relationship, because it is shameful. The society has incorrect labels of domestic abuse victims as weak or incapable to take care of themselves. No one wants to be identified like that. The media portrays domestic violence as something very clear-cut, with obvious physical harm, and never the other perspective. Never perspective that in domestic abusive relationship there still are positive elements. Women would never remain in this abusive relationship if it was all bad. And this is what makes it so tricky to leave. The cycle of abuse includes this so-called honeymoon stage, where after a potential breakup, or when the abuser understands that he went way too far, he changed his behavior, and everything seems to be good again, sometimes even better than before. This process of going from terrible to great is one of the essential parts of the cycle of abuse. You have no idea how good it feels when finally all the pressure is gone, when your partner is again the man you remember falling in love with, it feels so great to be together, and it's a huge relief, which proves that, you know what, it was worth waiting and hoping for. The sad part of this is that it never lasts. Therefore, the presence of positive times in relationship does not negate the fact that domestic violence exists. My intuition started to tell me to leave him after the first year, and even though I didn't feel or realize that I was abused domestically, the way I was treated simply didn't feel right. But you must understand that in the abuser's world, his partner is seen as his property, as an element which suits his future plan and shall not disappear at any cost. Following are some of the tactics used in order to prevent victim from leaving. Happily, we didn't have children, though we had shared projects. He told me if I leave him, he would immediately delete our YouTube channel that we had been working on for a couple of years. That's something that I had put my energy and time into. Or that at any time he could stop my eShop system and close me down. I didn't want any of those to happen, so I simply couldn't just leave. There were a bunch of times when he physically forced me to stay in the car or in the apartment until I calmed down, or how I would say, until he changed my mind. He would just stand in front of the door and wouldn't let me go. Once I wanted to escape, I needed to escape from his car. I tried to jump out of the car, but he grabbed my hand, started to drive, and locked all the doors. I screamed that I want him to let me out of the car, but he didn't care. That day, without my consent, I was driven 70 kilometers with locked doors, and I was forced to listen for his monologue about how things still have chance to get better. Not letting me escape was actually one of the most important factors, because if he managed to physically stop me from leaving, then I was forced to listen to his well-constructed persuasions. My abuser is a very smart person. He's very good at chess, and this is a perfect illustration of his well-developed logical thinking. Though as his empathy was quite limited and instrumental, and seemed to most of the time appear only when it was convenient to him, instead of trying to understand the reasons for how I felt, he analyzed the exact situations that provoked my decision to leave him. It was genius. He was asking me questions that logically always led to the conclusion that we are simply not working hard enough to become a perfect couple. That he will definitely try harder to change for the better, and so should I too. Though it didn't feel right. I really doubted it, because I felt that I'm already working really damn hard on this relationship, and I was really tired from constantly walking on the eggshells, making compromises and playing by his rules. But I also have an infinite hope in humanity, you know? What if this time he would actually change? At the same time, let's not forget that my company and YouTube channel were always at a constant risk. The statistics say that on average women are leaving on their 8th attempt. It took me a very similar number of tries. 2 times I actually made my mind and left despite any threats. First time in Thailand, after he was mean not only to me but to my close friend. I asked him to not contact me in any ways for at least a week, but of course he didn't respect my wish. Instead, he made several video diaries saying how now he understands everything, how he agrees what an idiot he was. He was crying and he was hoping that I could give him another chance. It was very sweet and very well thought through, because in one of the videos, he asked our mutual friends to record advice for day, how not to give up during the hard times, that all relationships has some tough bits. When I think of it now, I feel sad for my friends, because they didn't know what sort of situation I was trying to escape from. They simply saw him, quote, as a man in love. You know, believe it or not, it touched me too. I really believed him that maybe when I actually fully left him, now he understood the actual reality, the real situation we are dealing with. However, after a month or maybe 2 months, everything went back to where it was. The second time I ran away was something like from the movies. I told him that I am leaving him via a text message, and I realized that he would probably tried to stop me, so I just grabbed random things, put into 2 big bags, and ran downstairs to get a taxi. Then I heard the sound of the tire. Someone was driving towards me really fast. I turned around and I saw his car. Of course he was chasing me. He got out of the car and tried to talk to me. I knew that my main goal is to ignore any possible contact. For 2 minutes, that seemed like an hour, I tried to not see him, not hear him, and not to be touched. When the taxi arrived, I just gave the driver a random direction and just asked him to leave as soon as possible. That night, I was sleeping at one of my dearest friend's place on her sofa. And the next 4 nights I spent in the meditation camp where I made my final escape plan. All the literature that I'm reading now says that making an escape plan in the situation of severe domestic abuse is essential because the time after a woman leaves is the most dangerous. 7 out of 10 women killed in domestic abuse are killed after leaving. It is also a time when any other leverage your partner had against you will most probably be used. My plan was very strict. First, to find a good excuse for moving out of his apartment with all my stuff, but without breaking up yet. Second, find friends or family members who will support me after I leave. Third, sell the company with or without getting my part back to me. Fourth, do not rush the things and choose a calm day to announce the breakup. Fifth, choose a public place in case things start to go wrong and I want to leave. Sixth, leave the country for at least a few weeks. Seventh, try to keep the communication peaceful and separate the finances. Eighth, get a lawyer to make finances official instead of based on trust. And ninth, when the finances are separated, leave the country. And so I stuck to my plan. I told him that I'm moving to my grandma's place to take care of her. My family and my closest friends knew that I might need their support after the breakup happens. I didn't get the shares of my company, so I just sold it as it was. As I mentioned before, my partner informed me that I owe him rental, food, and all the gifts, so I can forget the money. Soon after this, my grandma died and I decided to give myself some time, and so maybe after a month I asked him to see me in the cafe. Slowly and as gently as possible, I told him that I do not see the future together. I left the country then and tried to stay in good terms with him. But once I introduced my lawyer to him, I realized how quickly so-called love can become a pure hatred. It was really bad. I was called a bunch of mean, sometimes mean Russian names and sent to many not nice places. I was accused of wasting 3 years of his life, that all the investment into me was for nothing, for no use, as he doesn't have me anymore. Note, he doesn't have me anymore. All this proved that I was simply a part of his plan, just a type of a property. His temper became like a roller coaster as he wasn't in control anymore. Me and my lawyer, we had a really tough time dealing with him while separating the finances. In addition to this, I was, of course, deleted from our YouTube. That's why you see me now on this new super tiny channel. And he deleted me from Patreon, both platforms that were earning money, although I never saw a penny of it. The very last thing that he was still in control was a breakup video which would go out to more than 30,000 of our subscribers. This was his last leverage, and he knew that. He was pushing me for a year, asking to meet him several times in order to do the last filmings. He promised me to make a nice video so the subscribers can find me and, just to leave it on a good note. I met him in Lithuania, I met him in Barcelona, wherever and whenever suited him. I wanted it to be over and I expected it to be kind and nice, just as he promised. The only 2 things I asked him were, first, to let me see it before uploading, because after all the video is about us and he's the one who was editing it. And the second thing was to upload it and publish it when I'm back from Cuba, as Cuba doesn't have a reliable internet connection. He did neither. And why? Because the video was attacked towards me and my new life partner. The facts were assembled in a way to make me look bad and to make him look like he's a victim. He used my dog's loss and his own grandma's death to make people feel sorry for him, even though even though that his grandma died 4 months after I broke up with him. He used the incorrect chronology of events to attack my character and to insinuate that I had been unfaithful. The bit that hurt the most, though, was seeing friends and other people in the comments under that video believing his story. It was so sad to see how easily thousands of people can be tricked so readily. Yeah, it felt unfair, it felt sad, but on the other hand, this is exactly what you can expect from your abuser after the breakup. It's like from the book. He didn't try to kill me, no. Instead, he tried to kill my reputation. Well, now there is no more reasons I need to walk on eggshells anymore. When I mentioned that I'm thinking of telling my story about our relationship, even if not mentioning him, I received this. I came up with so many ideas of how to make bad things happen to you, though I don't want any drama. But you know what? I'm not a victim anymore. He does not control me, and I'm not afraid to speak up. An abuser is typically formed by the environment he grew up in. Therefore, I do think that as a society, we must show that domestic abuse is not something we tolerate and that abusers must change. Though, in order to encourage this change, we must understand why abuser is an abuser. Because in many cases, the abuser once was a victim too. Insecurity is one of the main characteristics of an abuser. They are hiding it by carefully showing only the created face for the public. They are charming, the ones who make jokes, who are always full of energy, and very often they are very, very helpful. Often they look like they are alphas of the group. But if you pay attention, you can notice that these people feel the need to always be right. If you pay attention even more, you can notice that most of their jokes are slightly belittling others and they rarely make fun of their own weaknesses. Being weak is their biggest fear. Being vulnerable means being hurt, and they try to avoid it at any cost. The greatest chance to show your vulnerability is, of course, to the person who knows you the best. So, in order to hide any insecurities, they try to maintain the superiority against their partner using the methods they know. The methods that worked for the abusive people they faced in their lives. The methods that worked for their abusers. I know my ex-partner hates his abuser due to the childhood traumas his abuser was responsible for. I also know he thinks he's being just the opposite. He would never drink alcohol, he would never beat his woman, and he works to propagate an extremely healthy lifestyle. However, to fully change, such people must work on the deeper issues. Abusers, like my ex-partner, often see and therefore learn deeply manipulative behaviors, their extreme financial control, cruel put-downs, ridiculing, treating women as she is worse or as a minimum less. In such situations, accepting that you are using your greatest enemy strategies in your life requires a lot of time for recollections and a lot of thinking, and it's extremely painful. The only way to change, though, is to live through all that again and be ready to face the fact that you still hold a part of that monster you hate deep inside yourself. None of us are finished. We are all humans in progress, and the abuser needs to seek help just as much as a victim. Once you acknowledge your situation as abuse, you gain power. I know, when you are a victim of abuse, life feels like a quicksand. It's hard to move, and every movement makes the situation even harder. I know that you can't even recognize who you are, and so you doubt even your own doubts. But inside, deeper than your thoughts, your inner voice knows exactly what's going on, knows exactly what you need to do, knows that you have been and you are mistreated for no valid reason, that you are not responsible for someone else's traumas, and that you can't help them as they need to help themselves first. That inner voice also knows that if you don't leave, the suffering will continue indifferently how much you would try to change yourself. This voice is your strength. It's not a voice of a victim, no. It's a voice of the real you, the survivor, that is still fighting. Only after leaving you will understand what a heavy burden you were carrying for months, years, or decades. You will face the fact that you still don't know who you are, but you will be able to explore and discover yourself. You will be able to create the life you want to live. Abusers give some comfort, and you will lose it, I know. But believe me, freedom is the most comfortable vehicle to explore yourself and the life, which you have only one. I feel blessed of what I went through, but especially where it led me. It taught me to love myself and share my intimate life only with those who truly love me, the way I am or the way I am changing. The ones who encourage me to be the best version of myself by supporting me and never by putting me down. I am now sharing my life with a new partner. Freedom, honesty, and appreciation of each other's authenticity are the core values of our relationship. You know, throughout my life, society taught me that relationship is a very hard work, and of course it's not always going to be easy. But I think that people spreading this message are sharing the recipe of their own unhappiness. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that you don't have to work on a relationship, but if all you do is work, then it is likely that you might be better off alone and available for another relationship to enter your life. Because I have learned that it doesn't need to be hard in order to be very joyful. To share all this was very hard because I was open about a lot of things for the very first time, and it has honestly taken me 2 months of effort. So your support is very important for me personally, but at the same time, it's a support not only for me, but for the whole movement that has started to happen. So please avoid the pitying part and better be encouraging. The last thing we need is to be treated like victims. Also, please take the action, share this or any other video talking about the domestic abuse or the need to stop it. I will add links to the test and some articles about the abuse, as well as phone numbers and organizations where you can ask for support or immediate help. And if you have your story to tell, feel free to do it in the comments. There's always something to learn from it. And this is all that I wanted to tell you today. Thank you a lot for listening.